very important regional planning discussion, sir, but is this going to change in the short term any of the activities of the Metropolitan Regional Board?
Ultimately, this is the question that Council has to address today. Regional planning, although it sounds a bit dry, is critical. This is one of the most important long-term discussions that we're going to have as a city. How do we grow? Where do we grow? How do we ensure that that growth is sensitive to our water needs and our land needs? How do we ensure that that growth is servable by transit and by active commuting? These are tough questions. And Council sometimes gets caught up in the stuff that's on fire today, but we've got to actually solve the long-term issues. And we know that we'll start having water shortages in this region by 2036. And so if we're not growing in a thoughtful way that optimizes our use of the water in this region, then we won't have a choice anymore on how we grow regionally. We just won't.
What have been some of the sticking points with the CMRB?
What are they?
What are some of the sticking points of CMRB such that there's councillors who actually want us to be out of it?
Well, certainly we had pushed for many years to have membership in the regional board be mandatory. And I think some of my colleagues may have forgotten that now that it is mandatory, it's not just mandatory for the counties, it's also mandatory for us, what's good for the goose. And so, we have to sit down with a bunch of people around that table, some of whom are really keen to be there, some of whom less keen to be there, and figure out what's best for the region. And that's always hard, because in some ways you have to set aside your own self-interest for the broader interest. And it's a real experiment in human behavior, but ultimately it has to be done.
This isn't a case of cynics might say, well, this is Calgary trying to protect their turf so they can maybe annex in the future and they can keep growing as this big unison.
Well, remember, that's what Calgary always did up until 1995. We simply grew by annexation, and it served the city very, very, very well. And in the late 90s, it was decided that the growth should be shared with these municipalities around us. And quite frankly, the urban municipalities, I think, have been quite responsible in their growth patterns. It's the rural municipalities where there's less ability to have transit, where there's real strain on the road infrastructure, that have been the bigger challenge.
What is the relationship with these rural counties, considering that you guys have gone and appealed like 3 developments, right?
Well, that's very clearly Council's approved strategy, that until we have the regional growth plan in place, then we will appeal stuff that we don't think is good for the region. And the regional growth plan is underway now. Hopefully it'll be done by the end of 2020, and that'll give us the framework by which we can grow together.
What does a change in government do to all of this?
It's not clear. Certainly I don't think regional issues were very high on the platform of the UCP when they were running. And so a lot of people are getting up to speed on this. The City of Calgary's position hasn't changed, and we'll continue to advocate hard for the needs of Calgary in a growing region.
So you're in the midst of this process with the board of developing a plan. Is there any reason to change what it's doing?
I think it's a really good opportunity today to get input from City Council on their point of view. The conversations around the regional plan and the board have both been technical and quite small in terms of dealing with the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee. So today is a real opportunity for the other members of council to get their heads around it.
Is there resistance to having economic development part of this conversation?
No, not at all. I think the difference is how you define economic development. Is economic development in terms of growth patterns, in terms of servicing, in terms of growth corridors, where different kinds of business will go, or is it about creating a regional economic development authority? So as always, the devil here is in the details, but everyone agrees this is ultimately about economic development as well as environmental protection.
Is part of this coming up with an advocacy strategy to the province, getting council aligned around an advocacy strategy about whether to urge the province to keep the CMRB structure or not?
I wouldn't quite go that far, but I would say this really is about getting City Council aligned and making sure everyone understands these issues well, because they impact us all. Whether you have a ward that is on the boundary of one of the counties, or whether you are dealing with developers who are developing both within and outside the city, it's really important that we're all singing from the same songbook in terms of what the city's needs are.
Can you give an example just to help people understand more? This is an important conversation. if you think of what's
Sure.
going on around Calgary's outskirts, why does this matter?
Sure. Let's talk about Cross Iron Mills. Cross Iron Mills is the closest shopping mall to my house because I live in the northeast of the city. However, Cross Iron Mills is just outside of the city limit. And certainly that's good economic development for Rocky View County. But the problem is that there's no transit there. So the kids that work there have to pay an extra $90 or $100 a month for a shuttle in addition to their bus pass just to get to work. And by the way, that shuttle stops just after the mall closes. So if you're having trouble cashing out or closing your store or whatever, you can't get home, or you have to take a taxi or an Uber, which is a lot of your wages of the day, to get back. So it's a very simple example, but these things we should be a lot more thoughtful about. Certainly Rocky View County needs economic development and different kind of development, but it also has to be rational, and it can't be just about the needs for one party. Now, an opposite example is the CN Intermodal Yards at Conrich. The city of Calgary not only advocated for that development for Rocky View, but helped broker the deal with CN, because that kind of work actually made a ton of sense to move out of the city and also to give some economic development to the county. And we have to get back to that level of win-win situations for everyone.
One other thing is regional policing the board or
The board is starting to talk about it. It's not entirely clear if that means regional policing across the region or if it involves the Calgary Police Service, and that's a question that I'm sure will be ironed out in conversations over the upcoming months. Thank you.